Well, good morning and welcome to today's RUC People, and I'm delighted to be joined by one of our very newest members at RUC, Jono Child. Welcome, Jono.
Thank you very much.
So, Jono, I know that you've recently come back to Cape Town from a stint in the UK. Can you tell us what were you doing in the UK, what took you there, and what's brought you back here?
Yeah, so I went to the UK almost 10 years ago. I very randomly got offered a job in the UK, like straight out of uni. I remember I was sitting in UCT marking tax exams and got a phone call from the UK and was like, what's this about? And it was basically a friend had passed on a CV and they offered me a role, and I was kind of at a crossroads in life and decided, oh well, might as well take that opportunity. So I went off to the UK at 23 and basically, I worked at Deloitte for 4 years, and have been in this kind of startup scene ever since that. Kind of now working in data, but that was kind of the journey to the UK, and basically most of my adult life growing up there, building friendships. I guess journeying further with my spirituality as well. But yeah, that was a whole period of life, and then I came back here and...
Well, before you get off the UK, there's lots I'd like to ask about that. So firstly, you were headhunted by Deloitte. That to do what exactly?
So I was a CA, so I was a chartered accountant. So I actually joined Deloitte as like a guinea pig on one of their programs to basically bring over South African accountants to work in the UK straight out of university. So I joined that program. It wasn't really a program when I joined it. It was very much just like me moving around a very big organization. But while I was at Deloitte, like I then took on that program and grew it. So I was responsible for about 30 graduates, mainly from UCT, coming over every year to London. So I'm somewhat responsible for the some brain drain out of South Africa. But yeah, that was kind of like the main thing I did at Deloitte, but then that was on the side. I mean, mainly I was working in auditing and financial advisory in that space for about 4 years. Yeah.
Okay, and how was that?
I mean, I didn't enjoy I didn't enjoy that space. Like, I guess I became a chartered accountant and went into finance because I enjoyed numbers and I enjoyed business, but like I found that space really quite restrictive and quite dull, to be honest. So I kind of had to do my 3 years, and then I was actually in a good team, and I kind of served out a 4th year. But the whole time, kind of during that phase, I was realizing that I was enjoying kind of working with data, manipulating data, doing analysis. So that kind of side of me I started to get more interested in that side, and I'd been interested in kind of the startup scene for a long time and followed that closely. So when I got an opportunity I joined a very small startup, and I got an opportunity to join that. So I kind of jumped ship from Deloitte.
Well, that must have been a big move, the safety of Deloitte, massive worldwide firm, to a brand new tiny startup.
Yeah, it was a jump. It was, I was only at that company for like 4 months. It kind of collapsed after 4 months, but
okay.
But kind of I guess when you're young and you're 20, I guess I was 25, 26 at that stage, and you'd saved up money and there was no real responsibilities. You didn't really feel the risk of like changing careers, and it was great because it kind of got me out of that space and into a startup, which then allowed me to go to another startup. Startups are notoriously like bad at hiring people from corporates because they're like, well, we want to have, they need to have startup experience, but it's the same old, like, how do you get startup experience if no one will give you startup experience? So that was kind of the leap I made. And then I was at another startup for 3 years, and now I've been at this one that I work for now for 3 years. But it was the leap was, I guess, in retrospect, probably quite crazy, but like when you're 25 and you're just looking for something interesting to do and like want to not wear a suit to work, then you're very happy to take the jump.
Fair enough. But I mean, also just leaving Cape Town 23, going to live in London, did you know anyone? Did you?
Not really.
And London's a huge city, and how was just apart from the work side of it, how was going to live in London?
I mean, it was daunting. Like I now look back and it was like, it wasn't. I mean, it's London and it's safe, and like Deloitte helped me move over. But in terms of like community, mental health, like building a life, it was pretty daunting going over 23, leaving. Like I mean, by then lived in Cape Town for almost my whole life, and had like very strong friendship groups and like grounding here and family. I think it was really good for me in the sense of like having to grow up, take responsibility, like learn how to make friends again, learn how to like associate like in different environments, join sports teams. It was like a completely like starting life from scratch with like I had one or two contacts over there, but London's a big city, and like having a contact is not the same as like having a contact in Cape Town, where they might invite you to something. You might see them once or twice for a coffee, but it's very much up to you to build your own life. So yeah, that was quite extreme. It was the first year was like exhilarating and exciting, and you travel lots and all of that. But years 2 and 3, I think, were relatively hard, trying to, I guess, make life meaningful. I was working really hard. It's cold. It's grey. The grey is what gets to you. So yeah, like.
And did you live alone, or were you?
No. I mean, no one lives alone in London just because it's so expensive. So you live in a house share, but like, I was at that stage wasn't living with friends. You're kind of living with random people. After 3 years, then I moved in with some friends, and life became a lot better after that. But yeah, you kind of living in a house share. You seeing friends now and again there. You have a lot of acquaintances, a lot of people that you see, but I kind of really missed and lacked like deeper friendship and deeper connection. Everything was quite surface level those few years. Yeah.
And did you take advantage of all the London cultural life and traveling to Europe around the corner?
Yeah. So I mean that's the good part of London life. Like it really is like an opportunity to jump to basically anywhere in Europe. So yeah, I traveled a lot into Europe, into Scandinavia, mainly like longer, like less weekend trips, so the odd weekend trip here and there, but more weeks all over Southern Europe and all over Europe, and then also like London life. I was probably at a gig. I went to like a music gig like probably once a week. So like that part of life really it was full on. You would be out like 4 or 5 nights of the 7 nights a week, like not out, but like, having drinks, seeing friends, getting home relatively late. Like it's a pretty intense life looking back compared to Cape Town life. But yeah, like I loved it for what it was then, but like I don't think I could live that life again. But yeah.
Okay. So what brought you back here?
So basically, after like I think year 5 in London, I by then I'd like built really good friendships and good community, and I'd actually joined a Catholic church by just because there was like a friend had recommended it, and I was just looking for something quiet and reflective, and I'd actually built a really nice group of friends there who were mainly European, like in the British culture, there's Christianity is just not very much of a thing, and especially Catholic Christianity. So when you go to a Catholic church, it's predominantly Southern Europe, individuals who are now living in London. And so I built this really nice group of friends, and it was really great. And then basically Brexit happened and COVID happened, and kind of it was like a cocktail together. Brexit didn't make people leave. Brexit just kind of stopped people coming. But it kind of it made all my friends who were European, who were kind of age 30 at the stage, when COVID happened, they were like, do I stay in London and live here, or do I go back to Europe? And they were already feeling like uncomfortable with Brexit, and like, were they welcome, were they not welcome? And so basically there was this exodus of people, like my friendship group, out back into Europe. And then at the same time, other friends who did stay in London started having kids and moving out. So basically, London is horrendously expensive for accommodation and kind of the central area. And so as soon as kind of kids come along, either people disappear back to where they're from, because not very many people in London were born there, or they move far out. And so there was basically like my age group. Basically, it was me realizing like I was going to have to start again in terms of like building friendship and building community. That was happening on the side. And then at the same time, I was in a long-term relationship, which I ended like in December-ish time, like 5-6 months ago. And I basically reached the point where I was like, I'm going to have to, in essence, start life again. In terms of building community, what I want, like what kind of life do I want to build? And I just didn't know if I had the energy again to do another like 5-10 years in London, because I was like, there's no point to me doing 1 year here and then we're back in the same place. Like I'm gonna have to not settle down, but decide where I want to put energy into life and want to build. So I'd been out here in November. And then got stuck with Omicron because I couldn't travel back, and had a great time being here and seeing friends and being with my family, and realizing that like I could build a life here, that there was an opportunity. Like it obviously wasn't going to be easy, but there was that floating around in my mind as well. And then when like the company I work for was basically like I said to me I could work remotely, it was like it was a no-brainer really at that point to decide to like kind of pack up London life and come back.
So you're currently working for a UK firm based in Cape Town.
I am. I'm living. It's a very good life. I mean, obviously it de-risks the whole situation as well. And now I have a British passport. So by the time I reached like, I don't know, whenever I was making that decision, I was like, there's no real decision to make here. There's an opportunity to go somewhere you love, go back to it and build a life. And if it's terrible, you can just hop on a plane and come back. But that wasn't kind of the mindset that I came with. But there was that at the back of my brain. And then, speaking to a few friends who are from this part of the world, not necessarily, let's just say Africans or Zimbabweans, they were like, why would you stay? When I was in London, they were like, you have this amazing opportunity to basically go back with a UK job into Cape Town and like set up life there again. Like, I think everybody knows how hard like London life is, and so you like when that opportunity arose, I was like, okay, it's time to come home.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So Jono, take us back to the beginning. You mentioned you've spent most of your life here. So were you born here? Tell us a bit about your family and your schooling years.
So I was born in Durban, but we moved here when I was like 6. So in essence, like from most of my memories are from Cape Town. I grew up in Muizenberg for almost my entire life.
Does it make you a surfer?
It makes me a very bad surfer. I was never really into it that much. I do remember like it's so strange. I surf now and I go back to Muizenberg and like some of my friends live there and I'm like, Muizenberg is cool now. It's like it's all developed and people want to go out there, and I was like, this is not what I grew up with. When I was 8 or 9, we were like, there were certain streets you couldn't walk down. But yeah, I grew up there. My dad is was a minister and is a lecturer at George Whitfield College, which is Church of England denomination. So he lectures there, and so that's why we were living in Muizenberg.
So he's an Anglican minister. He was an Anglican minister.
Church of England. They wouldn't call themselves Anglican, but in essence, yes, they're a little bit. They're probably they're a little bit more like Reformed and than the Anglicans, a bit more Calvinist.
Right.
But yeah, so
And he lectures in theology? Or?
in theology, all sorts. I mean, now he's retired and just does the odd course. But yeah, so my whole life in faith and growing up, and basically we always had students from his college coming around there, was very much around that world in Muizenberg. They were kind of one of the only, I would say, institutions, companies that kind of stayed in Muizenberg during the not so great times. So they kept on buying up property and really like established themselves and built this, I would say, campus in Muizenberg. But it was a good life. Like I remember, we had the beach, we had the mountain. You could walk around barefoot. Like it was a very relaxed environment to grow up in. And I was at school at Wynberg Boys. Me and my 3 siblings, my mom used to drive us through every day to the kind of the 4 schools.
Right. 4 siblings, where are you in the pecking order?
I'm number 3. I always say the forgotten sibling. Feeling sorry for myself. But no, I have 2 older siblings, one 6 years older, one 8 years older. And then a younger one, 2 years younger than me. So I say forgotten just in the sense that like my parents were always worried about, or not worried, they were concerned, like getting used to brother and sister going to high school, then going to university. And like I was the 3rd one, just, doing the same path as them. And my sister, unfortunately, when she was very young, had a brain tumor. And so that developed some complications. So from a very young age, I kind of was very independent and just kind of got on with life. Was good at school, good at sports. I played a lot of chess growing up as well. And kind of was just kind of very, I mean, obviously I couldn't drive and do anything, but was very self-sufficient. Just kind of was like, there's chaos in the family in the sense that like everyone's running around, it's 4 kids, it's a lot going on. And I was just like, well, I'm gonna not kind of make my own path and do what I enjoy doing, which has kind of stuck with me. Hence me disappearing off to London. Also, I did a gap year in Zimbabwe, which we'll get to at some point. But I was like, I made all these I now look back and I'm like, wow, I was like very independent and very just kind of get on with life from a very young age. But yeah.
And you said you did well at school. You're into sport. What kind of sport were you?
So, I mean, I played a lot of hockey and a lot of cricket at Wynberg. Wynberg is a very, very sporty school.
Jacques Callis.
Exactly. So, yeah, and I remember, I was saying to a friend the other day, when we were I was playing first team hockey and we were 16 and you train 4 times a week. I was like, this is crazy. We were at high school and we were training 4 times a week, we were professional sports people. It was but it was that serious. But it was great fun and enjoyable. It wasn't I never felt stressed by it or to perform, but it was a very nice environment to be in. I loved being at Wynberg. A lot of people have asked me, did you struggle with it being single sex and all that kind of stuff? I think for me, it was a good environment. It was healthy. It wasn't overly masculine and overly dominated by the jocks or the rugby guys. It was there was a real emphasis on things like culture and service. And if you were good at academics and you were a nerd, you weren't ostracized. And it was relatively diverse as well in terms of racial makeup for one of the boys' schools. So I really enjoyed that environment. It was very safe in the sense of you just, if you were good at something, you just kind of got on and did it. And there wasn't, there wasn't cultural pressure to be cool or to do anything else. You could just be a kid or a teenager and grow up and enjoy those things. And yeah, so that was school life.
And the academic side of it, I mean, you said you did quite well. I mean, did you have a sense at school that you wanted to go into finance, accounting, or?
Yeah, so I've always enjoyed it. I remember I always somehow had money, and that was one of the other things. My parents would always ask, like, where did you get this from? But like I remember I used to win, like, I'd win chess tournaments where you'd win some money, and then but a lot of the time we'd play, like, there'd be some kind of game or some kind of craze at the time at school, whether it was, I don't know, like Pokemon cards or something, and I'd end up winning them and then selling them back to the rich kids, and like somehow finding a way to make money or to generate some, you know, in order to go to the tuck shop or stuff. So there was always that side of things. And my uncle, who I was very close to, was an entrepreneur and had quite a big business, and there was always part of me that was intrigued by that. So I was much more intrigued by, like, I would say, the business side of things, or like how it worked. I was good at accounting, but accounting is relatively simple. Accounting is very simple. But yeah, I was much more intrigued by, like, I guess, the finance side of things, or, you know, how do you generate a good business? What does it look like to do those kinds of things? So I did those kinds of things at school, but when I was at school, I kind of knew I was going to go into the business side of things at university, because I guess also that was all I knew. I hadn't really at that stage, like, explored academically other things. I didn't really know much else about the world, and I was good at that. So I was like, well, that's what I'm going to go do. But yeah.
So they took you to UCT?
Before that, I did a gap year in Zimbabwe, because at the time I was at a very charismatic church, and I kind of wanted. Actually, both of my siblings had done gap years, and I wanted to do a gap year. My parents had encouraged it a lot. This idea of, like, finish school and go spend a year somewhere and, I guess, get to know yourself a bit, grow up a bit. Yeah. And I was umming and ahhing around where to go. So the church I was at had a program through, like, the network of churches where you could basically do a year serving in one of the churches, but it was like on a structured program, and you would do training like blocks for 2 weeks, and it was kind of a worldwide network of churches. So there were people coming from America, from the UK, and so I was thinking of doing something somewhere in South Africa. At the time, I didn't really know what, and then they suggested that, why don't you go to Zimbabwe? And go to Harare, and there was a church up there, and, like, work with that church. And, like, I guess as a 17-year-old, you just were like, yeah, that's interesting and exciting. Yeah. In retrospect, it was absolutely crazy. It was 2007. Like, Zimbabwe was basically collapsing as a country.
Well, they say it's been collapsing for about 20 years.
Yeah, but at least I have the US dollar now. I mean, when I was there, I remember I got there, and, like, 1 rand got me like $300, and I think when I left it was like 200 million. It was like, you can't. I still have a very close friend who's a Dutch guy who I was there with, and we say to each other that, like, the only people we can speak to besides Zimbabweans, and he lives in the Netherlands now, so he doesn't see many Zimbabweans to speak to about the experience is each other, because no one else understands, like, what it's like to be 17 in an environment where we didn't have a driver's license, there was no fuel. You were like, everything was about who you knew and how you knew them, and, like, how you could get something. But we were, in essence, strangers coming into this environment, trying to, like, figure out how we would get bread or meat. Yeah. And, like, that our parents just let us go when we were 17 into this environment. I was like, this is crazy. But it was a hard experience, but it was, like, also wonderful. Like, I worked for a church there. I worked for a youth organization. We ran these camps every.
What was the name of the organization?
Zambezi Holidays. So right. It was linked to the church, and they would run these camps in the holidays, which were like adventure outdoor camps with a Christian element tacked onto it. Right. So it was a real opportunity. I got to lead. I got to preach at the time. I got to, like, lead groups. I got to organize things, and do, like, run aspects of the camp. And I I worked at the youth group at the church as well. So it was a real like opportunity to grow up and develop.
For a 17-year-old,
exactly,
a lot of responsibility.
There was a lot of responsibility, and Zimbabwe was the reason there was a lot of responsibility is that basically what happened was in Zimbabwe, as soon as you finished high school, if you had done well or you had any opportunity, you left because you didn't want to stay in the country. You wanted to either go to the UK or come to South Africa. Yeah. So there was like this missing age bracket between like 18 and 30 because they'd all left the country. And so me coming in as a 17, then turning 18-year-old who had capacity, they were like, yeah, you can do this, you can do that, which was great. Like, I look back at that year very fondly, but it was like, I don't know, like my parents never even like warned me that it probably wasn't, it was probably going to be a bit daunting. But I don't think anybody knew either. Like it was quite, we knew Zimbabwe was collapsing, but we didn't really know the state of it or what, like it wasn't dangerous. It was just like, yeah.
Well, it sounds like navigating that for a year makes London, age 23, sound a bit easier.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, London was a walk in the park compared to that. So yeah.
But having done the gap year, you went to UCT?
Yeah, so I did the gap year, then went to UCT for 5 years. I got my did an accounting degree, got my chartered accountancy degree. It was a really, like, I loved UCT. It was a great time to like grow up, explore, meet people from other parts of the world. Like obviously going to an all boys school was very like, it was quite monoculture. So yeah, meeting people, exploring things. I read, like I used to catch the train from Muizenberg to UCT every day and back, and I just would read 40 minutes in, 40 minutes back, and I wasn't reading anything to do with accounting or finance. It was like, I feel like that was my real education, was like the opportunity to just go down rabbit holes of things that I enjoyed or topics.
What kind of stuff would you read?
A lot of economics, a lot of like why the world is the way that it is, macroeconomic stuff. A lot of theology at the time. I was very much still part of like this church I was in, and very much, I guess, trying to build a framework for understanding faith or God that was a bit different, and was struggling with questions and the way in which people describe God. So I was reading very heavy theology at the time. I was very lucky. My dad was a theologian, and I had lots of access to books, but I also had his library card, and they actually had a great library, and a lot of stuff in that library that they would not recommend for you to read, but they had it in the library. So I would go and read all the stuff that you weren't supposed to read, and then get involved in like we would have, I would say like every second Sunday, like a group of my dad's students would come over for lunch to my parents' house, and I loved getting into arguments with them, and trying to like debate them on a certain topic. And so yeah, that was kind of my way of trying to wrestle and figure out faith and figure out what I believed. But yeah, I was reading a lot of theology. Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about the faith journey side of things. You know, you were born into.
Yeah. I went to church before I was born. Yeah.
And you know, you've talked about when you were enrolled as a member. Last week, you were talking about your foray into charismania, which you've mentioned again. Talk us through that journey a little bit. You know how how it developed, and maybe how you found your way to a church like RUC now.
So yeah, like I think growing up for the first 13, 14 years, I mean, church was just something you did. You went with your parents. You didn't have a choice. I wasn't really interested in it. At some point, something changed. I don't really know why or when. And I did start becoming a little bit more interested in faith. And I went to my dad's church for a couple of years, I think, after that, still with like some interest towards the faith and like probably some form of belief. But it kind of all really changed. My brother was at this at the church called the Bay in Muizenberg, and he invited me when I was 15 or 16 to some camp. I can't remember what. And like, I guess that was where like I became a Christian. Like I feel like something did happen in that space. I did find some form of faith. And inevitably I ended up just going to that church because that was where I connected with God. And so yeah, like at 16, I went into that space, and it was incredibly transformational. I was up until that point like quite a shy kid, and not very confident in myself. And I found like in finding faith and in that charismatic space, which is very centered on like, you know, your relationship with God, and, you know, Jesus is your personal savior, but it's also very centered on like who are you and what are you becoming, and there's all kinds of problems with that as well, but it is good for like what like Richard Rohr calls like ego development. It allowed me to have like a strong container or strong boundaries to be like, this is what I now believe, this is what I want to become, this is how like I grow up in this space. And so I was part of the youth group. I started doing like sound engineering for the band. I got like totally involved in the church and found like real meaning in that charismatic space. Like I loved the worship that we did. I wouldn't say the theology was very good, but like the people were also like, at that time, were also very welcoming and friendly. There were a lot of young adults, a couple like guys who took me under their wing and helped me like, I guess, navigate life a bit. And so I found like incredible meaning in that space. And like, I would say that was my faith, like my young faith, and I don't regret any of it. I also like the community mattered a lot, and like we were connected to a church called Jubilee and Arbs and some other churches out in Somerset West, and we would do these like yearly camps together, and which were like great experiences. You would have, I mean, now looking back, you try to be like, was it real? Was it not real? Like you would have these like moments in the spirit, and there'd be a lot of hype, but it's, in some ways it was real. In some ways it was like, this is me finding faith. This is me like growing up and journeying. And you don't necessarily have to make sense of it all. It don't have to be like it was, you know, it was God or not God, or like, I don't know. I don't look back at it and try to dissect it and be like, was it real or not? For me at the time, it was real. It was a way of expressing faith and a way of finding meaning, and a way of like, also I guess like realizing that you were loved by God and that this mattered to you. And that was, yeah, like it was all fine and dandy for quite a long time. I think where things started to like unravel was I started running so the bay is in Muizenberg, but it's on the M5, and it's right next to an informal settlement called Vrygrond. And it's quite a big church, like 400 people, but it's very multicultural and very like very cross class. So you have this like a lot, probably I would say 50% of people coming from Vrygrond or from the Cape Flats, kind of quite poor or below the poverty line, and then quite a large group of people, normally white people, coming from kind of Muizenberg, Takai, Fischhoek. But there was this kind of like real divide. It wasn't spoken, it wasn't said, but you know, in essence, the white people would sit on one side, and the black or colored people would sit on another side, kind of split by class and wealth, and nothing was ever said of it. And at the time, I'd started running an entrepreneurship kind of program there with a friend. We were doing like this 12-week program on a Saturday, kind of, in essence, training people in kind of business skills, how to start a business, but also in like employment skills, how to get a job. And through that, I built some really good friendships I still have to today with some of those people from the township. And it really started to mess with me, because now I was asking questions like, why, like, how does this person come into the space? Why does no one else talk to them? Why when we have a braai, is it just the white people? Why don't we build like cross-cultural, cross friendships? Like, we all in this same building together, but nobody speaks to each other. Nobody, we're not thinking like, we're not trying to pool our resources or think like, how can we, help each other? And not just from like a, wealthy people need to help poor people and like weird power dynamics, but like we're not even talking about it. We haven't even got to the point of like how to think about how we would do this and what would be the complications. We're just ignoring it completely and making like it doesn't exist. And then really started to, like, at the same time I was reading a lot about like faith and empire and why the way we think we do, and how, are we just following in the footsteps of other people and we believe because the system around us tells us to believe. And so like I was deconstructing, I think quite severely at the time, and I think it was incredibly like real, because I was seeing it on a weekly basis. I was driving into the townships. I was also leading the youth group at the time, and most of the youth group was guys from the Cape Flats, and I would drop them off, and I'd become like in essence a mentor to them. And you're dealing with such radically different problems to what you grew up with. But at the time I felt like I was on my own. I was like the only one in the community or the church like thinking about these things from I guess the like more wealthy white side of things. And I was, challenging the leadership. I've never felt scared to voice my opinion. So I was very vocal, and I was not senior in the church, but I did have a voice. And I was in essence getting nowhere and kind of being ignored. And I think some of the shine of the charismania had started to wane on me, and I was much more looking for a faith that was a little bit deeper, a little bit more quiet, a lot more reflective, and something that wasn't necessarily like right and wrong. That could handle vagaries and darkness and like loss and all these kinds of things. Where charismatic theology was very much like very triumphant, and everything's got to be great. And when you're sitting with people who don't have a job and haven't had a job for 6 months and are barely surviving, and the theology or the faith I didn't have anything to offer them other than my friendship. And yeah, basically I was spiraling, and yeah, at the time I went through like a breakup, and I basically woke up one morning and just said, I can't do this anymore. And I left the church, and I came to RUC. At the time I knew Dan Adams through another friend, and Dan I liked Dan, and somebody suggested I come along here, and I just was like, I'll try. I didn't know anything about RUC. But for me at that time, it was, my life wasn't falling apart. My life was falling apart from like a personal point of view. My theology was coming undone, and I just needed to be in a space that it was okay to not have answers. It was okay to be a mess. It was okay to not have to serve as well. Like I was at the church probably 4 nights a week for like 6 years doing everything, and like I was exhausted, and I was in my final year of uni. And so RUC became like a real safe space for me in terms of putting my life back together. Like I remember, like I still to this day like love our Easter services, and particularly Good Friday, because I was like, it was the first I came to a Good Friday service, and it was the first time it was just like everything is broken and bad and dark, and that's okay. And I was like, this is great. Like, I think I was so over the, like, you know, everything is going to be great. God's on your side. You can be, you know, you can be whoever you want to be kind of theology. And I was just like, life is not like, look at these people struggling. Like, life is not like that. And I just wanted something that acknowledged the pain and acknowledged loss and acknowledged how hard life could be. And that was okay. And that you didn't have to immediately like transition to everything's going to be okay, that you could live in that space for a while and you could still live meaningfully and put your life back together. And so, yeah, that was RUC, and like it was a really like special time. And I think like I came here and then a couple of my friends followed, and there was like this little community that formed for like a year and a half before we kind of all disappeared to other corners of the world. But yeah, RUC became a space that I could put my life back together. Yeah.
Oh, great. Did you join up with a faith community in London?
I tried initially in the beginning. I went to a couple churches for quite a while, and then I gave up. And then I had a very good friend over there who knew I was struggling and was looking for something, and he suggested I go to this Catholic church, and it was a Jesuit Catholic church, but very liberal. It was like the Centre for LGBTQ in the Catholic Church in the UK. They were kind of seen as outsiders, but they had this young adult mass where I would say there were like 60 to 80 young adults going, which in London is a lot. And it was a very open space. The thing with Catholic theology is that Catholic faith is that they don't really value theology as highly as we do. They gather around the Eucharist. So they don't gather around belief. So they don't see the you don't have discussions around, I mean, you might have a discussion about abortion or about something, but for them, that's not, you don't define somebody being in the group by what they believe and like what, you define the group by the fact that we come around the table, that we have Eucharist. So there was such wide-ranging beliefs amongst the group, and I don't even think they even knew like how different the beliefs were, because they just never talk about it. And also like it was a really healthy space because you had like a lot of different cultures and a lot of different beliefs, that a lot of different discussions, a lot of people that you wouldn't meet in your normal kind of daily life. And it really made me appreciate like that. It made me appreciate that like belief, or you don't join because you're the same as somebody else. You join because you want to like be part of something, and that you can have very wide-ranging beliefs and different opinions, but you can still be part of the same kind of faith community. You can still be friends. Some of those friends are still very close friends today, and we would like vehemently disagree about a lot of things, but like we'll go on holiday together. So it's like, yeah, where I think growing up in a very like Calvinist conservative world, where like, you know, you need to know exactly what you believe and why, and then in a charismatic world, which was actually quite similar, it was a breath of fresh air to like be like, we don't have to agree to be friends. But yeah,
that sounds very relevant to the decision you've just made to become a member here. I mean, I dare say there's quite a few people who wouldn't all believe the same things in this church, but the sense of community is important. And you know, you've made a decision to be part of this church. Was that a big decision for you to take?
No, I mean, not really. I mean, I've always loved RUC, and it's always been like whenever I've come back from the UK on holiday, I've come and visited. I said to Robert, I find like Sunday morning like therapy for me. It's like I come here, it's safe, I get challenged to be a better human being, I reflect a bit on my own life. I meet people who I wouldn't come across in my normal daily life because like most people are quite a bit older than me, which is lovely. It's multicultural. I was like, and I don't feel like I'm joining somebody's like empire building, thing, right? I can just come to the space and it's healthy. And so like when Robert asked, "Do you want to become a member?" I was like, "Yeah, for sure." Like I'm very willing to commit and to give energy back into this community. It's been good to me, and I now feel for like the first time me being in the space that I actually have energy to give back into it. I can contribute. I don't just need to take now. I have energy in life, and yeah.
Great. So, what's next for you? You're back here now. Tell us just maybe a little bit more about the company you're working for, what you do, and other hopes, aspirations.
Yeah, so the company I work for is called The Plum Guide. It's like high-end or curated Airbnb. I have no real like great joy in we always laugh amongst my friends who I work with. We're like it's a company that basically helps rich people find nice holidays, and none of us really care about that, but it's a good company. I love my colleagues, and I work in kind of data and data science. So I have some data scientists that work for me who normally ex-PhD individuals who can program, building algorithms to solve various problems within the business. We also run all the analytics, so that's basically dashboards and data to help people make decisions and to see trends and to understand what's actually happening within the business. I oversee a team, and then I also use a lot of this data or come up with ideas and work very cross-functionally across the business to try and improve departments, or I see opportunities where something isn't working, and I will kind of either come up with a solution or sit with them and be like, if we did X, Y, and Z, we could improve this process. So yeah, it's very what like an old CFO would have done, in the sense of like they would have used financial numbers. We were using like other numbers, not normally financial numbers, to try and understand what's happening in the business to basically make it better. Yeah. So I do that remotely from my bedroom most days. Not my bedroom, from my lounge most days. But yeah, so.
And other interests? You mentioned chess. You're a pretty handy chess player.
Yeah, I haven't played chess in a long time. So I was very good at chess growing up, and then chess is incredibly demanding. It's not I guess it's a bit like a music instrument. You can have a bit of natural talent, but at the end of the day, it becomes so much about your work ethic. And as a 14-year-old kid, I just didn't want to spend 6 hours a day playing chess, which is kind of what you need to do if you want to be really, really good. So no, now I trail run. I get outdoors as much as I can. Being back, I find it incredibly good for my mental health and just reflecting on life. And so trail running or hiking. Otherwise, building community again. So coming back into Cape Town after 10 years, obviously friendships have changed, people have changed, people have kids. It's a different world. So I've spent a lot of my energy and time also trying to invest in my relationship with my parents and my family again, because being gone for 10 years. Yeah. And now trying to, I guess, build a friendship base and build community again. Being out, connecting with people is where I've spent most of my free time.
Sure.
And I think that's super important for me, is to kind of, I don't just want to come back to, live the nice life of, eating in nice restaurants or hiking. It really, life for me is meaningful when it's the people you spend it with, and it's having a glass of red wine, and it's knowing about somebody's life and being able to care for them and them being able to care for you. So yeah, that's what I love. And I also feel like people always say that Cape Town's a bit cliquey, which I guess is true, but it's at least for me, it's much easier to build those friendships and those connections here than it was in London. And maybe that's the fact that I'm from here, and it's just easier culturally. But I also think that like the environment is more conducive to just having outdoors, people having space at their homes, like people want to connect. So yeah.
And natural beauty and
Exactly.
better weather and
Yeah.
I would say earning pounds and spending rands sounds like a pretty good deal as well.
It is a very good deal. I don't know how long it will last, but yeah, it's a very good deal.
Great. Well, it's been wonderful to get to know you a bit better, Jono, and great to have you back and officially as part of RUC.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.